Do you find it difficult to communicate with certain people? Would you like to experience better relationships, both personal and professional? Our DISC certified speaker, Allison Tabor, helps professionals like us improve our communication with others. Allison is a respected advisor, speaker, and facilitator who guides business owners, executives, and their teams in the areas of leadership and collaborative communication. Allison facilitates for the International WPO Women Presidents Organization, leading peer advisory groups of women presidents and CEOs of multi-million-dollar companies. She's the author of the best-selling book, Work Your Assets Off, Stop Working So Hard in Business and in Life, and the current and almost past president of National Speakers Association of Northern California. And I must say, on a personal note, Allison has done an amazing job this year with NSA-NC. When she isn't speaking or facilitating, Allison can be found ballroom dancing with her husband, Perry, being walked by her rescue dog, Gracie, or driving topless. The car, that is. To discuss Communicate with Style, Understanding Communication Styles, please join me in welcoming Allison Tabor. Take it away, Allison.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you so much. Well, so we had such a great dialogue around communication. You're gonna hear some of those themes weave throughout our conversation. I'd like just to point out a couple of things. We'll begin with, wherever you go, there you are. This isn't always great news, especially if you have one size fits all approach when communicating with others. So wherever you go, there you are. And if people around you don't share your communication style, it's not necessarily a great thing. And I heard from a few of you that you had some concepts of communication or that you're very familiar with. And I want to ask you, just by show of hands, if you'd raise your hand, if you've ever heard of the golden rule. It was brought up during our Q&A. So do you have any familiarity with the golden rule, where you treat others the way you want to be treated? Yes, many of you do. And there's a problem with this rule. Why is there a problem with this rule? Well, it was very well intended. It was meant as a extending of virtue. It's, well, clearly, if you want to be treated with respect, then treat others with respect. And if you want to be treated kindly, treat others with kindness. So while it was well intended, the problem is we took it literally when communicating with others. So rather than treating people the way you want to be treated, the platinum rule is that you treat people the way they want to be treated, the emphasis on they. Well, we don't necessarily know how they want to be treated, and that's something we're going to explore when we go into some of the different communication styles. One thing that is clear is whether you have one style or another, as humans, we all want the same thing. We want to be heard. We just experience being heard in a different way. Our styles can inform how we wish to be heard and how effective it is in being heard. So if you want to experience great communication with others, it really begins with understanding your own communication style and that of others. And of course, what you do with that information. We have a lot of intelligence in this room on the topic of communication. And I imagine that every single one of you, just like me, have had experiences in communication that didn't go quite the way we wanted. Is that a fair statement, that not every communication, every interaction goes exactly the way we like it? So it's not just knowing the information, it's really, what do we do with the information? How do we apply it? And how does this help us? How does it help us be in great communication and great relationship with others? So how do we learn more about our own communication styles? Well, one is by tuning in, using frameworks, and using assessments. So let's start with tuning in with others. So when you're interacting and engaging with others, are you present? Are you curious? Are you actively listening? Or perhaps you're distracted, or you're listening to respond. That came up earlier in our conversation. Listening to respond isn't the same as actively listening. And perhaps, like, well, what message is your body giving? Yeah, I'm listening. Go ahead. Janice, please go ahead. Yeah, I'm listening. Yeah, I'm listening. So what is your body language sharing? And what about the body language of the person you're speaking with? Now let's consider first impressions. How long do you think it takes to form a first impression? Let's add it to the chat. And Janice, if you could please read off the chat, how long do you think it takes when you meet someone for the very first time? How long does it take for a first impression to be formed? Let's put it in the chat. I'd love to hear what you say. So Janice, you have a minute. Who else? Let's see. 1 second, 1 minute, 10 seconds, 15 to 30 seconds. Okay, 3.5 seconds. Well, we're all in the close ballpark. The answer is 3 to 7 seconds. And I'm sure everyone here, each one of you has experienced where instantly, haven't you instantly experienced where you meet someone, you're like, oh, I like that person. You just feel it. You're like, you don't know anything about the person, but you just met them and within seconds, you have a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I like that person, or, oh, not so much. I'm not sure how I feel about that person. Well, one of the things that most influences our first impressions is our communication style. So we have a bias towards our own communication style. And once you form an impression on someone, it's very hard to change that. And that's because of a confirmation bias, where we're scanning and we're looking for evidence that we were right in the first place, that the impression that we made is correct. And let's just take our very own Antonio. Antonio White, you were sharing some feedback after Dan Thurman's recent talk. And you said that it took seeing him juggle and doing these handstands to come up with the idea that maybe he wasn't as serious as you thought he was. Well, I'd be curious to know what gave you the impression he was serious. Maybe it was just his photo. Maybe it was his initial, attentive appearance that he had when he started to interact with the group. But it's interesting how that impression was made and having something to kind of jar us out of that impression. So on the topic of impressions, there's perceptions, and I'd like to share this with you. If everyone could see this diagram, can everybody see what you see, an image that's here on my screen? Thumbs up if you see that.
Yes.
Okay. So if you look at this image, I'd be curious to ask whether you see in this image a duck or a rabbit. And I'd like for you to put in the chat, if you see a duck, just type duck or even a D in the chat. For those of you said you're very few words, that's okay. Just put the initial, put D or R or duck or rabbit. And if you see both, just type in both. And let's see what we have here. All right, so duck at first, see rabbit, duck first, duck both. So duck, rabbit, let's see. A lot of ducks, a little bit of both. All right, so why am I sharing this illustration? And before I even explain why, I'll actually point out where the duck and rabbit is. For those of you that are saying, I don't see the rabbit, where's the rabbit? I don't see the duck. So if you look at this diagram, if you want to see where the duck is, the duck has its beak going this direction. So here's the outline of its head, here's its eye, and the beak is going this direction. That is the duck. Now, if you just reverse it to the other direction, the rabbit is where this is the outline of its head, and here's its eyes, and this is its nose. And then this is the ears that are following behind the rabbit. The rabbit is looking this way. And if you see a dog, that's a different talk altogether. To bring a psychologist in for that conversation, I don't have that ability to share on that. But the idea of this, why is this important, is this particular slide illustrates that we can be experiencing the same thing, but we translate it differently. It goes through our own filters, and one of our filters is our communication styles. So when looking at this, if I see a rabbit, and Janelle, if you see a duck, are you wrong, Janelle? No, right? And if I see a duck, and Carl, you see a rabbit, are either of us wrong? No. What do we do, however, in communication is what we do in communication is we make the other person wrong when they don't see things the way we see them. So it's not a matter of our communication styles that one person is right, one person is wrong. It's just that we experience things differently. And one of the filters through which we are experiencing things is our communication styles, along with other types of filters, our experiences and all of that. But communication style is one of the important ones. So consider the first impressions when you're having an experience with someone, you're exchanging ideas, but they're really already forming an impression. And it's so hard to change the first impression. So since you only have one chance at making a great first impression, you may as well make it a great one. And how can we do that is through this conversation that we're going to continue to have on understanding communication styles. So in order to understand communication styles, we can use frameworks and reliable assessments. One of the assessment tools that's out there is known as DISC. I know some of you are familiar with DISC. This room is rich in the experience of communication, and you may be familiar with DISC. DISC has been around since the 1920s. It was founded by William Marston, and it continues to evolve today. And there's lots of tools and instruments. And frankly, I always say it's like I've never met a flavor of ice cream that I don't like. So think of it in terms of the assessments. There's lots of assessments, and it's finding the right tool that works for you. Some tools are more reliable than others. Some are more understandable than others. DISC is the tool of choice that I found very helpful personally and professionally. It's used all over the world in multiple languages, has many applications, and ultimately it helps us to better understand our different communication styles. So let's go back to the communication styles. I'm going to share this image, and if everyone, I assume everyone can still see that. Janice, along the way, if you don't see something, just let me know, please. So I will share, this is just a diagram to illustrate the 4 different communication styles using DISC. And there are 4 styles, 2 of which are extroverted and 2 that are introverted. I will go through each one. I'll start with these 2 extroverted styles. The D is the dominant style. So this is dominant. These are after one, every style has one primary focus, and we are a blend of all these. So some of you may have more D present in your communication style, some of you more I, some more S, and some C. So we'll start with the dominant, the decisive, the directive. The dominant, decisive directive is after results. That is what they want. They want results. So Allison, cut to the chase. Get to the point. Let's go, let's go, let's go. When you want to have information come to you quickly, succinctly, you are results oriented. And in the spirit of that, you bring a lot of energy and momentum. You get things done. Excuse me. You get things done. Sometimes you may talk over people. You may actually interrupt people. And it's not that you're intending to offend anyone, but in the spirit of trying to get things done, you're moving fast, thinking fast, acting fast. Someone along the way may not appreciate that. So every style has its blessing and its curse, really. It's not that one style is better than another. You might think your style is better than the other, and often we do. The challenge is that we're not interacting with a world that is just like us. We have all these different styles. And if we're communicating through the bias of our style, then we're missing out opportunities and connecting with others. So the D, the director, the dominant, is looking for results. The I is the influencer, and the influencer is caring mostly about the experience. Influencer cares about connecting and relating. Hi, how are you? Talk to me. Tell me, how was your day? The D is like, we got stuff to do. Let's get down to it. So you have different priorities. The influencer brings a lot of positivity and energy and enthusiasm, to the interactions. They're excited. They're the half full of the glass, whereas other styles may be more the half empty, that are more skeptical and concerned. The I is all about connecting and relating with others. So can you see just in the first 2 styles how they don't sound similar? And that if you have a preference in communicating as a D, you're interacting with an I, it feels like going back to the conversation we had earlier about language, it's like they're speaking a different dialect than us, right? So the D wants results, the influencer wants the experience. And then we move over to the S, the steady. This is all about steady. Think about predictable, consistent, reliable, loyal. They are very even-tempered. They have a lot of patience. Whereas the D, not so much, right? That's going to be selective, right? So the S is very even-tempered, and there's, again, positive and challenges of each. The positivity side of the S is they bring a lot of calm. They bring a lot of reason and bring a lot of even-temperedness and consistency. And then we have, other styles that want these different things. What does the steadiness want? They want security. So if you are going left and going right and going here and going there, that is very disruptive and very uncomfortable for the S's. They like security. So if you are adapting and having to change all over the place, it doesn't mean that you can't. It just means that it's harder. The high S's really like to have things be more consistent and predictable. And then the challenge with the S's can be a couple of places. One of them is they're so calm that sometimes they don't have as much energy and enthusiasm. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, the D's and the I's are communicating with a lot of intensity. They're like the 8, 9, 10. Hi, how are you? Let's get this done. We've got things to do. It's like, hi, how are you? Let's go, let's go, let's do this. And the S's are like, hi, how are you? It's lovely to meet you. Like the volume, it comes down to like a 5. Right? So you could just feel the difference when you're interacting with an S, that they're going to be in this space of just their tone and their presence is going to have this calming effect. And then the C is the compliance. So the compliance, the C's are after one particular thing, is information. What they want to know needs to also be accurate. Allison, how reliable is this disc thing? What exactly is this disc thing? When did it begin? How do I know this disc thing is helpful? Where's the information that conveys its validity? How do I know I could rely on it? How many of these have you done? How many have these been done in the world, etc.? So the curiosity that the C's have, it's all really coming from a place of wanting to have quality. They want things to be correct. They want things to be, correct, and they want to understand. So there's nothing wrong with any one of these motives. It's great to want to have a focus on results. It's great to want to connect with others. It's great to have things be calm and consistent and predictable. And of course, it's great to have information. The challenge becomes when we're speaking from our preferred style and not really being inclusive of these other styles. Some other things to know about these four styles. I'll separate this here. These 2 styles going this direction, these are your extroverts. And then these 2 styles going the other direction, these are your introverts. So when you meet people, you might have a sense, wow, I just met so-and-so and they sure seem to be an extrovert. Their energy, they're 8, 9, 10s. That means they're likely going to be one of these 2 styles. When you meet someone who's introverted, you may not know which style they are, but they're likely going to be one of these 2 styles. So we may not know what people's styles are without having an instrument, a tool, an assessment like DISC, but there are constant clues being shared with us if we are tuning in and paying attention. And if you use DISC as a framework to understand the different styles, then you can better understand what their styles likely are. And I do have one of those tools and resources that I'll share with you in a moment. I want to continue with this discernment between the extroverts and introverts and share that not everyone falls into the category of being an extrovert. Not everyone falls in the category of being an introvert. Some of us are ambiverts, where we have one foot in extroversion and one foot in introversion. So it's not one size fits all. Our communication styles, as someone said earlier, it's simple, but it isn't easy. We are complex creatures. We have layers, and understanding each layer will certainly make it easier for us to better understand ourselves and others. So knowing, are we extroverted? Are we introverted? Are we ambiverts? That's a great start. The other thing to consider as we're looking at communication styles is that we have 2 styles, these 2 above the line here, that are very process oriented. And then there's 2 styles that are very people oriented. So if we are interacting with people, and let's say we are a combination of these 2 styles, well, we may have some extroversion and we have some introversion. However, what we also have is a lot of process. So where might we run into trouble when we're interacting with someone? We're all about the process. And what happens if they're all about the people? What if they're a blend of these 2 styles? Can you see how that might have a different impact, right? Because we're accustomed to, or we want to experience communication in our own style. That's our bias, that we prefer to have that. So in these particular styles, let's have as an example. When you're interacting with, let's say, a high D, they might talk fast and move fast and want you to make a decision very quickly. Well, the S and the C, they need time to process, they need to digest, they want to analyze the information, and they don't want to hear, oh, just let's go. We need to make a decision now, and it doesn't matter, we'll figure it out later. That's stressful to the C and the S. On the other hand, if you're a C or you're an S and you are interested in having something, let's say you're trying to get someone to adopt an idea that you have, and you're sharing data, facts and figures and charts and graphs, and you're giving evidence of why this makes sense. The high D is like, oh my gosh, you're killing me. Let's just get to the point. Just bottom line this for me. Just tell me, should I go left or should I go right? It doesn't mean that the data doesn't matter. The data matters, but it can only be digested in small bites by the D who wants to be able to process quickly and move on. So I'll pause with that just for a moment. Have you, as you were looking at that and hearing these different styles, I'm just curious, just maybe even by a show of hands, how many of you have a general sense, or maybe even more than general sense? How many of you have a general sense or more than general sense of what style you might actually be? Just by show of hands, how many of you have a general sense? Okay, well, so the good news is you'll have an exact sense of what your style is in a little while, because I'll be sharing a link to an assessment. I wanted to share the link ahead of time, and sometimes I do. Sometimes people appreciate having the opportunity to take an assessment and then talk about it. Other times you want to hear the sort of the context of what does it mean when I actually see the results. So if you're curious as to what your communication style is, you'll have an opportunity for you to take an assessment, which is my gift. It's completely my gift to you. There's no cost associated with it. The only thing I ask is to not share it with anyone else, because there actually is a cost associated with it, just not for you. So it's going to be my gift, where you'll be able to go in to an online assessment, answer questions, and then you'll be able to see a very robust report and a highly reliable report that will share with you what your communication style is. So whatever your communication style is, you could see from this illustration that I was sharing, is that we're not all hardwired the same. So we all have our different approach to things. And so whether you're friendly and optimistic and gregarious, you might be disappointed if you're interacting with someone who is very more serious and very perhaps cynical and exacting. The high C's are looking for possible problems. They have a scanner for, what could go wrong? That's an important thing. We want to have a ability to be aware of what could go wrong. Whereas the high I wants to know, all the positive things. And so they may feel like it's a personal disappointment to them if you're bringing, good news and bad news, and they just want to hear mostly the good news. If you're talking about why that's not going to work, or, yeah, Janice, that's a great idea, but, and by the way, the word but, I don't care what communication style you are, if you are using the word but in your vocabulary, it is the #1 communication killer. It does not foster a good communication with people. A great replacement word for but is the word and. So if Janice says, Allison, I really want you to see my point of view on this political situation, and I'll say, okay, Janice, I understand that, and I'd like for you to see this perspective. I'd like to have you understand and recognize this perspective. But if I said, Janice, I understand what you're saying, but really you've got to consider that such and such and such and such. Janice is no longer listening because I'm saying but, which completely negates her. So yes, it's important to understand our different communication styles. And it's also important to know that we all want to feel heard, and using certain words like but will prevent us from feeling heard. So there's a resource that I'm going to share with you that's going to really help you to recognize styles in others, because you're not going to have an opportunity to go around and say, oh, hi, I'd like to know, what's your communication style? Hey, Judy, Michael, what's your communication style, as I really would like to communicate with you effectively. You won't have that opportunity, but you'll have the opportunity to observe and to put your observations through a framework that can help you to identify their style. So Janice, if you wouldn't mind dropping into the chat, there's a tool, and I will share what this tool looks like. This is going to be a tool that you're going to get in the chat that looks like this, and you'll have several pages. I'll start with just talking about this first page. This particular tool helps you to see all the different styles, and it outlines for you what each style looks for. So some styles, like we talked about, the C wants information, and the D wants results, and the S wants security, and the I wants information. This is a tool that's going to give you the general framework of what different communication styles are. Knowing that each style wants something different, you could also see where they're extroverted and where they're introverted, where they're people-oriented or process-oriented. So everything that I just walked through, you'll have an opportunity to digest this more slowly. Now, if you're a high C or you're high S, you're going to love this tool, and you're going to dive into this tool, and you're going to probably use this as a reference on a regular basis. If you're a high D, not so much. You're going to say, hey, Allison, do you have a Reader's Digest version on this? And I do. It's a simple bookmark that I usually give to people when we're together in person, where it just quickly shares the 4 styles, 2 introverted, 2 extroverted, a couple of key things to know about. Now, there will be additional pages. You notice this page is going to have the yellow top, and this one's going to have the blue top. I'm just going to use this as a couple of examples. Once you learn what your communication style is, let's say you are the communication style where you are a C, the compliant, this becomes your roadmap. And think of it as an example would be as you're starting on an island. This is your island, the island of the C, and you're traveling to these different locations. You're traveling to meet someone who's on the island of the D communicators. And you're also traveling to other C's, and you're traveling to your S's and to your I's. Your coordinates and your mapping instructions to get from one place to another will sound different. So when you look at this tool, which you'll be able to interpret this later, you're going to start off by understanding what is your own communication style. If you're the high C, you're the compliance, the cautious. You're going to know data. You may overuse data. You may over-evaluate. You may benefit from having more enthusiasm. You may have trouble selling products that are below your own standards. You're well organized. You provide good service. And one of the overextensions for the high C, you can get stuck in analysis paralysis, right? So knowing this, and now if you're communicating with someone who's, let's say, very different than you, you're communicating with someone who is a high I, know that they're looking for the experience, the connection. Focus on people, be friendly and fun. Listen to them as they talk, ask questions, show excitement about their products, close earlier than normal. This set of instructions is going to be different, even though you are the same person, but now you're communicating with someone who's different than you. Let's say you're communicating with someone who's the high D, knowing that the D is looking for results. Touch upon the high points, the facts or figures. So that means resist the temptation from overloading them with all the facts and figures that you might have already assembled. Don't overuse the data. Move more quickly. Be brief and to the point. Satisfy their strong ego. Allow them to win. You win too, which means find points of agreement along the way. So I only wanted to show a few of these just to illustrate how to use this reference tool when you're actually comparing that with your style. So you're going to learn what your communication style is by taking this assessment. And you're going to have this tool that's going to help you. And you'll see that at the very back end of the tool, you have a page that summarizes all 4 styles. And you'll see what are the preferences for all 4 styles. And this is used whether it's in sales, whether it's in any context. This one is particularly positioned as if it's for sales, but really we're all in essence in sales in some form, because we're trying to sell our thoughts and our ideas and get people's buy-in, if you will. So everyone have access to the tool. Everyone has access to the information as it should have as a PDF. And I'm looking in the chat here to see did everybody get the tool okay, or were you just following along?
We don't have it.
I'm having technical difficulties. I actually practiced this last night, but I don't have capability because I'm not the owner of the account, but I'm going to try my best. And if I can't do it today, I promise to email it to everyone.
Okay. All right. So we are not able to because it's a restricted, I see. I just tried dropping it in myself. Okay. So you will have a couple of things. You're going to have this tool, You're also going to have a link to an online assessment. The online assessment takes about 15 minutes to complete. And actually, there are different levels of tools that are out there. The one that I'm actually sharing with each of you is actually a combination tool. It's what they call a DISC Plus. And the DISC Plus is a DISC assessment, and it's also a motivators assessment. One of the things, we don't really have time to dive into the motivation side, but I want to share that when we're interacting with people, you have a few things that are at play. The communication style, which is the how we connect, how we were receiving information, how we're sharing information, how we respond to people, situations, and problems. But there's also this underlying what matters to us, this why. You know, are you focused on let's say one thing, for example, is you might be a very curious person and you want to learn, or you might be someone who really wants to know, how does this change the world? How does this make a difference in the world? So you might have an altruistic focus, you may have a theoretical focus, and you'll be able to see that in your report as well. So I'm giving you an introduction to this with the hopes that you will recognize the value of understanding your own communication and style and that of others. And the tool will give you some more guidance to doing this more specifically. And of course, as you start to digest all this information, I'm happy to answer questions, which we'll have some Q&A time today. And also I'm happy to connect with any of you separately and go over questions. Before we wrap up, there's a few things that I'd like for you to consider. Just consider that we tend to really like people that are most like us. They're easy and they're comfortable to be around. So we tend to surround ourselves with people that are like us. But easier is not necessarily better. And wherever you go, there you are. And so is everyone else, each with their unique communication styles. So if you want to go from good to great communication, you want to understand your own communication style and that of others, then combine that and use that constructively. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's give Allison a big round of applause. And thank you so much. I'm going to ask if anybody would like to come off mute and ask a question. And Allison, you can take control over the Q&A, or I can do it for you.
I'm happy to. We're still on Spotlight feature, so I'd like to see, did you want to keep it there?
You want me to keep it or remove it?
It's up to you.
Okay, so, but everybody can put their own camera on gallery view if they want to, I believe. So Kathy, kick us off with your question.
Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge your generosity, just your generosity of information and resources. That's great. And I know that the DISC has been around, and one thing I'd like to say, and I know that you've outlined it beautifully, but I had it done in the 90s, and I was a little less mature back then in thinking that it was cast in stone as compared to the fluid approach of beginning communication styles, not like hard and fast rules. And so what have you experienced over the years is how people have grown? I mean, once they acknowledge, I'm a high I, I'm and even with the Enneagram, I've done all of them, right? All the way back to my cosmopolitan days in the 70s and 80s of taking those tests. But I know that there's a consistency, but there's also a fluidity to it, that it flowers and grows and changes. What's been your experience with that, Allison?
That's there's two things to consider with that. Generally speaking, we have a predominant style of preference, and we evolve over time based on our experiences, our life experiences, our professional experiences. However, I don't often see someone who was a predominant, let's say an extrovert, who was a high D, become a low D. You just don't see that very often. I would say that where you see most differences in styles, where someone will have a significant change, is usually when they've had a life transforming experience, like an experience with a mortality scare, or the loss of, like, there's sometimes you're shaken to your core where you do have sort of an underlying change. For the most part, we have a predominant style and we carry that style with us. However, we have learned how to recognize and leverage that. Even though we don't have DISC as a framework, even if you've never heard of DISC before, you know, oh, I'm a little too much for this person right now. Let me step back.
Mhm.
Oh, I need to bring up my energy. I'm a little bit, too soft on. Like we are kind of catching ourselves, so we adapt. And when
Yes.
you take the assessment, you'll see you're going to get two graphs. Actually, I could show you. Here's an example. There's a graph that's going to look like this, and
Mhm.
there you notice there's color and there's a gray area. This color is your natural style. This is the who you are, how you are when no one's watching. This is your default. And especially when you're under stress of any kind, you will revert to your natural style. However, we have interactions with people that appear somewhat different because we are adapting. Our adapting style is the gray. So you might, for example, be a super high D, but that's a lot of intensity for some people. So you have self-restraint. You realize, ooh, a high D can be very demanding and commanding, table banging and intense. This is a high D. They're almost, at 100 is like 99. So you might, if let's say you were this person, you might have this self-awareness and say, I need to bring it in a little bit and exercise some restraint. And so you may come across as a much lower D. And eventually that starts to affect you. You start to actually bring your D down a little bit because you're evolving to the environment around you. You're recognizing that bringing your full D unleashed in certain circumstances may not be the most welcome thing. But it doesn't mean that you change who you are at the core. You're still there, but your natural style may differ from your behavioral external style that you're sharing in the world.
Yeah, and I love it. The whole invitation of authenticity can begin with this, and then realizing the compassion connection part. One of the things that's funny that I have stayed true to is being a high I with a low S. I always make sure that I surround myself with people that are very high S, because I tell them, if you need the original document, you better hold on to it. So,
Yeah. And
thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you. I appreciate your question. And I would just add one other thing is that we don't want to understand ourselves to label anyone, because just as you shared, we are evolving. And so it's not like, oh, you're a D, there you go, you're being a D, oh, you're an I. So I would say use that information to understand and connect with each other. That's why I invited you to use it constructively. Why did I use the word constructively? Because it's not to make someone wrong for being a different style or to label them, there you are, you're being a this or that or the other. It's not going to get you what you want, which is connection with other people and good communication, right? So thank you, Kathy.
Janelle.
Oh,
Janelle, you're muted, dear.
Still
Still
muted.
muted.
There we go. I have 3 monitors, and boy, my mouse doesn't know which one to go to. I do know that as I'm getting older, I'm getting more set in my style. I mean, I can see that in myself. But I have noticed that you can really pick these styles out in small children. My goodness, you can pick them out just instantly. A lot of it through their body language than anything else. But what does DISC say about the genetic component of these styles?
Well, there's 2 questions when you say the genetic component. So at what age is using an assessment helpful, or at what age are styles obvious? I'll start with what age is obvious. Our communication style is as both nature and nurture. It's a combination of we're born into the world with our own style. The challenge is how is it met in the world? So, for example, some of us may have multiple siblings. How many of you have at least 1 or 2 brothers or sisters? And can you say that you were all very different in your styles?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Even twins can have that, right? So even though, and this is assuming, because assuming you have the same sets of parents, right? So if you have the same biological mother, same biological father, multiple siblings in a household, you can still have very distinct personalities that start from infancy. Now, here's where the challenge happens, where people start to get formed differently. If your household doesn't respond well to that, let's say you're born into a home where the parents really value speaking up. And let's say you're shy and you're a little intimidated, and you're like, come on, speak up. I can't hear you. Like, so you're made to feel like you can't be quiet or shy, so you speak up, or vice versa. Let's say you have a voice, and this happens culturally too. I have conversations with a lot of women from China who have this, where they were not really encouraged to have a voice, an independent voice, and so they were told to be quiet. You don't get to speak. So there's a lot of high D Asian women who are not necessarily. It's not necessarily known because they become masters at masking it, because it was not acceptable to be that. But it's like an inner almost turmoil, right? Because they are having to suppress their natural instincts to move fast, talk fast. Oh no, they can't. They have to sit on their hands, and it's stressful. So our styles are present at birth, and we are also informed by our community, our family, our schools, our churches, wherever we are, we're getting feedback on how acceptable or unacceptable the style is. So we might start to modify our behavior to conform.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was fascinating, because growing up in my home, my mother was extremely gregarious and outgoing, and I picked up a lot of positivity from her, but I also picked up some negative traits that I've identified and worked on changing. Carl, you're up next.
Yeah, I just wanted your thoughts on this. One of the things that we see as a major cause for small business failure, and some very large business failure, is that people want to surround themselves with like people and with like styles, and this creates a big echo chamber. And what we emphasize at Alpha Dogs is that you got to have the diversity of thought, you have to have the diversity of approach, and the diversity of communication styles, as long as everybody in the room is an adult and can tolerate the other ones.
Yes. Oh, it's such a great point. There's two words that distinguish this. There is complementary and there's compatible. We're often in pursuit of our compatibles. We want to be around people that we're compatible with. The gift is in being around people who are our complements. And that isn't an easy gift to access, because if you don't appreciate, respect, and integrate the differences, then it could feel like conflict and tension, and it's not well received. So similar to you, Carl, working with executives, one of the questions I'm always asked, by the way, there's two questions I'm often asked around DISC. What is the ideal profile for a CEO is one question I am asked. And what is the ideal profile for a salesperson? And the answer for the CEO is the ideal profile for the CEO is whatever their style is, to the extent that they surround themselves with their complements. So if you're a CEO who, let's say, is a super high, D, and you're all about like implementation, you need a little cause for pause. You need someone to say, wait a minute, let's think this through. So like execution without thought's not great, or contemplation without actually taking action isn't going to be great either. So the best teams that I see, the most highly functioning teams, are the teams that don't necessarily have a specific style at the helm. They just have a leadership team that brings the variety of styles. Just like you bring different experience levels and different skill sets, you want to bring the different communication styles as well, in a framework that understands them, respects them, and most importantly, the key is leveraging them. So you leverage the styles that are unique, and that's first and foremost. I spent my first part of my career, I spent 23 years running an structural engineering business with my husband. And so imagine working with your spouse for 23 years. Some people would never even start a business with their spouse. And if you look at the DISC, it's like a stair step. I'm one direction, my husband's the opposite direction. He's like my mirror image. We are very different. And for the first 2 years of working together, it was a challenge. That's when I first learned DISC. I actually brought DISC into my business and used it with my team. And I thought, oh, this is like my mind was blown. This is a game changer. I've been on autopilot and I've been triggered by so many things and he's triggered. And I was like, now you recognize, oh, I'm triggered because he wants to dissect and analyze every recommendation. And I want to cut through my to-do list in our meetings. And we have these like different, like almost opposing agendas. And then after 2 years and doing this DISC, I learned a different approach. We broke our meetings into 2 meetings a week instead of 1 longer meeting. We had 2 shorter meetings. The agenda was sent ahead of time. And I know that my husband needs lots of information. So I would give him the information in advance that he could research and digest. So when we came to the meetings, we were ready to go right to, discussion, decision. And it was too much for me too much of me to expect him to come to a meeting and make a quick turn. He needed time. He needed data and time to process and digest that. But I would say initially, it was like, what's wrong with him? And he's like, what's wrong with her? Like it was like a judgment thing.
Yeah.
And then we realized, oh, we were successful for 23 years. Why? Because we learned to not only appreciate and respect our style differences, but to leverage them. And it also works personally because in September, we'll be celebrating our 35th wedding anniversary. So I have to say, I say that I am proud of that. So thank you. I'll take that in. I appreciate it. I can honestly say that if it weren't for DISC, this is the best testimonial I could give to DISC. If it weren't for DISC, I don't know that we would be seeing this, right? Because we definitely could antagonize each other if it weren't for the fact that we recognized, hey, we are just not hardwired the same, but we have similar interests and values and we love each other, and we even like each other. You can love each other and still like each other after 35 years. That's pretty amazing, right? So DISC helps to really help us to not personalize people's differences and instead recognize, appreciate, respect, and leverage them.
Yeah, yes, I think most of the people in the room here know Doug and my partner, and know that 2 people couldn't be more different than Doug and myself. And after a little bit of discussion, though, we always end up pretty much at the same place. And it's because this is a very important part of what we do and what we can consult on is this communication and diversity of thought. Don't surround yourself with an echo chamber, and respect everybody else's perspective.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. That's great insight.
Thank you so much, Carl.